I told you this would happen. I predicted this. I told you this would happen. And I was right. Manchester City schooled Arsenal. They took him to school. Pep Guardiola took Mikel Arteta and he taught him another lesson. The master teaches the apprentice another lesson. That sums up this match. Arsenal, first of all, they were lucky to even get a goal in this match because that penalty that they got awarded was not a penalty. I'll take it to the grave. Ederson was unlucky to have that awarded a penalty. I mean, the ball was gone. They ended up clearing the ball off the line, and they gave a penalty for that. I don't think that was a penalty. And I think, honestly, it could have been a little bit of a makeup call considering what VAR had done to Arsenal in the past couple of games. And it's just one of those things. Manchester City were still able to overcome that and ultimately get the win here. This was an absolute masterclass. Erling Haaland, once again, great performance. People were talking about how he's making City worse. And I think he silenced a lot of those critics today. He finally gets a goal against the Big Six team. He silenced those critics today that he couldn't do that. I mean, to be honest, I don't know how he had any critics based on the season that he's been having, but he did, and I think he silenced those today. Jack Grealish, I mean, he silenced the entire British media today, getting the winning goal ultimately for Manchester City in this match. I give a lot of credit to Pep Guardiola because in a lot of matches like this, he tends to overthink it. He tends to, ultimately take a lot of the blame for these types of big matches when, they ultimately go wrong. I mean, it happened in the Champions League final. It's happened in the Champions League multiple times for Man City in his tenure. But this match, it was a huge match, and he didn't overthink it. I mean, he played pretty much the exact same 11 that, got the win the last match. Played a lot of the same tactics, played similar football. He didn't change it because it wasn't broken. And I give Pep Guardiola a lot of credit for that. It's something that you wouldn't think he needs to have credit for keeping the same lineup, but he does because he typically overthinks it. So I give a lot of credit to Pep. But then ultimately, it wasn't a terrible performance from Arsenal, but it was disappointing because you would have liked to have seen more. But I think what was shown here was that City just have the better depth. They overall have the better squad. And that's why I predicted them to ultimately win the Premier League. I mean, it's the analogy I used last episode. The elephant was going to fall out of the tree eventually. And this is exactly what happened. The elephant has started to fall out of the tree. They still have a game in hand. They still play Manchester City again. The title race is not over. But I think that Manchester City will go on one of these magical runs. They always do of a winning streak. And they will ultimately go ahead and win the Premier League title. Because, it's what I think I just saw the statistic. They have lost 12 consecutive games to Man City. 12. Not even, they can't even get a draw against Man City. So they just have their number. Arteta, he has got his work cut out for him with this Arsenal team right now because they are in desperate need of picking up points, and they cannot fall behind of this Man City team. They have to keep it at this, level on points with a game in hand margin. They have to keep it like this. And based on what I'm seeing right now, it's going to be difficult to steady the ship. And I would give Arteta a lot of credit if he is able to steady the ship. But for me right now, this is Man City's title to lose. I said it last episode, and that's what I firmly believe will end up happening, come, I think, May when they ultimately end up lifting the title.
This was the game Arsenal could not afford to drop all 3 points to. I said it last episode, and I somewhat begrudgingly said they would draw. But I just had a bad feeling going into it that Manchester City was on the rise and Arsenal were on the fall. And that's what happened. I mean, City absolutely outplayed them. I mean, Kevin De Bruyne scores an absolute screamer. And then, like you said, Arsenal were lucky to score, but they were unable to score from open play. And they just played somewhat uncharacteristically how they've been playing this whole season. I mean, City were able to dominate them and really make their attacking third efforts not as lethal as they looked this whole season. And Erling Haaland did finally show up. I mean, that is also something that people have been making up. I mean, Haaland has failed to score against all top 6 clubs away from home. That's something he was struggling with to do, but he finally did that. And all credit to him. I mean,
good finish as well.
It was a good finish, and that was the nail in the coffin. But Jack Grealish's was the game-winning goal, and that was, like you said, he's a guy that gets criticized heavily, mostly for his price tag, and him being a guy that mostly comes off the bench and not really being the player that City got him to be. But he scored a very important goal, and if City do go on to win the title, that's going to be possibly a title-winning goal, and I'm not ready to say that it's fully done. Like you, I mean, you didn't go as far to say it's fully done, but this is definitely, now it's a race. Like if it wasn't a title race before, now it's a race because Arsenal do still have a game in hand, but this is about as you know wall to wall as it gets. I mean, it's gonna be, you know, if you draw, it's absolutely, you know, you hold your head in shame because you can't afford to drop any points anymore.
No.
Arsenal cannot drop any points, and that puts a lot of pressure on these young players because, like you said, City player for player have a much better squad. But Arsenal were riding the high that they found good form and they were playing good football, but now they're starting to get rattled a little bit and they're not responding well to it. And Arteta's going to have to steady the ship and really have to rally his troops because their entire title hopes ride on that, because they can't afford to drop any more points, because I don't know if City's going to be dropping a crazy amount of points. They still have to play Arsenal once again, but the record against Man City is not very good at all.
Terrible.
And I don't think, like you said, City, to give them a chance like this to where they know what to do. They know they can go on these winning streaks. To give them that opportunity to be like, just go and do it again, it's really dangerous, especially against a team like Arsenal that's never really been there. They haven't been there since what, the 90s? Like, this is a team that hasn't been at this, you know, almost the precipice in so long, especially with a very young team. It's not impossible. We've seen lesser teams be able to do it. Like, I mean, for example, Leicester City, but Leicester City was possibly a once in an entire eon, you know, occurrence. And this is probably going to be, this would be the closest thing to that Leicester run. But like I said, it's so impossibly hard to do that, especially when Leicester did it. It's a tall ask. And I'm still gonna back Arsenal to do it because they were still my pick. I'm gonna ride with my pick. I'm not ready to fully abandon them, but it's definitely rocky roads from here on in.
I mean, yeah, and I mean it's one of those things you needed to see a better overall performance, especially at home. I mean, when they go and play Man City again, which is ultimately
It's
now
gonna be at the Etihad.
we circled this game and we said this was the game. Well, let's go ahead and mark your calendars, folks, because this next game at the Etihad, that is the game here, and yeah, they're gonna have to turn up in that game, but ultimately they're gonna have to go ahead and turn up in these next games. Ultimately, because they cannot drop any more points. I mean, they have Aston Villa next week in the Premier League, and Man City were able to just take care of business against Aston Villa, but let's not act like Aston Villa are any slouches. I mean, Unai Emery has definitely fixed that team up, and they're playing good football, and they're gonna have to turn up and get a good result at there. They're gonna have to get all 3 points. They cannot even afford a draw anymore. And when you look at Arsenal's 11 today, the guys that they needed to step up didn't necessarily step up. Saka, he did score the penalty, which shouldn't have been a penalty, but even besides the penalty, he played well. But then guys like Odegaard, who had been in discussions for potentially, if Arsenal win the league, he's going to win Premier League Player of the Season. Where was he today? Where was he? I didn't see him.
He's dropped off in his form.
He took the day off. I mean, was he even playing today? I didn't see him. Martinelli, poor today. Nketiah.
Martinelli hasn't been really flourishing in Gabriel Jesus' absence. I mean,
exactly.
Really,
that's what I was about to say. Nketiah, he's done all right since replacing Jesus. He's filled in the spot admirably, but you needed to have Jesus for matches like this. And you can definitely notice his absence more in these big matches like this against a Man City, where if they had Jesus, maybe this result goes a little bit differently, because not only he plays better, but also he improves the whole team. He makes Martinelli better. He makes Saka even play better. He makes the midfield play better because he drops deep and helps connect play. He is that guy for this team, and that's why they, paid the money to sign him. And it's, we'll see when he's able to come back, if he's able to even come back this season. I'm not so sure. But Zinchenko, he was looking like he was still playing for Man City out there. Gabriel, I mean, Jesus Christ, that might have been one of the worst center back performances of the season. And Tomiyasu, bro, I don't even know why he was playing. Ben White should have been playing, but I don't know why Tomiyasu
Ben White should have been playing.
But Tomiyasu was ultimately the guy to blame for that first goal, and then, Ramsdale, he gave up 3 goals. What can you really say? I mean, he's the goalkeeper, is what it is. Yeah. So overall, my thing with Arsenal is just that they needed to play better, but I'm not surprised by this. I expected this to happen. And, like I kind of said before, I expect Man City to, go on a winning run here. This is the start of something special. You don't want to awake the sleeping giant. It's what I said last episode. And that's what has been done. The sleeping giant has been woken up. They're getting on that killer form just when they need to. And, Arsenal, they're starting to fall off a little bit. The elephant is falling out of the tree, like I said. And it's one of those things. I would be shocked and impressed if Arteta is able to steady the ship and get this team looking right again, like it was before the World Cup break, and ultimately when they were 50 points midway through the season, which was on pace to be a centurion. But I don't think
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to be able to look anywhere near like that again, and they're going to finish comfortably second place in the Premier League. It's what I would expect.
I mean, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, obviously, Arsenal fans would have liked to have definitely won a league title, but I mean, it's tough when everybody's already basically crowning you before you even really before the season really
Well,
starts
yeah,
because
the season does not end at Christmas, and that's what people
yeah,
are
like
thinking.
it doesn't, and I mean we were guilty of that as well. I mean, there's a lot of points where we came on here and said, Arsenal have won the title. I mean, there's a clip out there where you congratulate Arsenal for winning the title,
Because
and
I
look,
thought it was I
may,
thought it was true at the time. Yeah.
maybe it's a bit of you're trying to jinx them, jinxing the team, and I think it's
I think
somehow
it
worked,
worked,
but
right?
it's somehow worked, but I mean, I would have to agree. I mean, the more likely scenario is City, the proven champions, will steady out and win out instead of a more unproven side being able to overcome what is Manchester City.
So before we move on to the next topic, I wanted to pose this question to you. If Arsenal do end up not winning the league, which I would say looks likely at this very moment, do you consider this season a failure for Arsenal, given what the context of what we know about the season, being top at Christmas, being at 1.5 points clear with a game in hand? Do you consider this season a failure if they don't win the league? Because I saw that question
Oh,
being asked.
yeah, I saw that one around too, and I would say absolutely not, because I mean Arsenal were probably hoping to even just make Champions League football. I mean, I get that there's such a great historic start to the season, but you're what they expected before the season was that they hoped to make Champions League football, and that's what they're going to inevitably. Look, I don't think there's really a chance that they don't make top four.
Oh, no, of
if
course
if
not.
they don't
Especially
make
because
top four, I don't something catastrophically would have to go on. They would have to be caught with like some cheating scandal that gets them relegated or something. But they're gonna make Champions League football, and look, there really is not a huge we lost to Manchester City in the title. I mean, there's a lot of teams that couldn't beat Manchester City in the title race because
that's
that's
prime
just
Liverpool. I mean,
prime Liverpool. I mean, we have to. We almost crowned Liverpool as somewhat champions because they had to play against Man City, so they were still really really good though. So I mean, it's not a huge thing to like hang your head in shame or nothing. But I mean, Arsenal fans are going to be happy. They'll be back in Europe. I mean, they'll have Champions League football once again, and I would not look at it as a failure. I mean, as long as they get Champions League football, it's gonna suck that they were top of Christmas and they were on a historic to be a centurion, but I mean you were playing so above your level that that was kind of unsustainable. That was literally unsustainable, especially with the players you have. A lot of players were playing above what they usually do, and they're going to need a couple more signings. I mean, in the transfer one, I think next season there could be a really good chance that they do actually are legitimate, like they can win the title more easily with a couple more signings, but they were unlucky to obviously lose Gabriel Jesus in the World Cup break. I think that's really been a detriment. So there's a lot of things that could go into what can happen next season. But this season, if they don't win the title, I don't think it's a absolute failure.
Yeah, and we don't do this all the way often, but I have to agree with you here. I mean, look, for the club, for Arteta, for these players, for even the fans, it's gonna feel like a failure because you remember you were basking in that glory of being at 50 points, being top of the league, being 5 points ahead of Man City with the game in hand. I mean, you thought you had it won, and it's easy to feel like that, but it took one blip of bad form, one loss to Everton, and now it's all capitulated. It's going to feel like a failure, but in reality, it isn't a failure because you have to look at the context. What did you think was going to happen at the beginning of the season? And if you told Arsenal fans that they were going to finish second at the beginning of the season, that they were going to be at some point neck and neck with Man City, they were going to be neck and neck with Man City, and they were going to really feel like they could go and win the title. Of course, they would take that. These are Arsenal fans that were starving. These guys were starving for any kind of success, any sustained level of success, and they were like, if we could get Champions League football, we're taking that. And that's exactly what's going to happen. They are going to get Champions League football, and they're ultimately going to finish second in the Premier League. Maybe even I don't think that Man United will overtake them. They would have to really, I think, keep up this bad form, and I don't think they're going to be quite this bad. They're not going to overtake Man City, but they're not going to be bad enough to let Man United overtake them, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
I get what you're saying.
This is not a failure, but it's going to feel like that. And I understand why it feels like that, because for any fan, any club, any player, Arteta of easing. You know, it's gonna feel like a failure because you felt like, and you're starting to even convince yourself that, man, we could really do this. You know, you had people convinced. At first, it was like, oh well, they're not gonna sustain it, and then they kept winning, and then you were like, hold on, are they gonna do it? You know, a little bit of doubt started to creep into everybody's mind, and then they really convinced everyone, and then they ended up bottling it anyway. So it feels like a failure, but it's not actually a failure. And for any Arsenal fans watching this, it is not a failure. You are already overachieving, massively overachieving. I know it's not going to feel like it now, but you know, you're still in a good position for the future.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, no matter what team you are, it's still gonna feel devastating because you're gonna feel we were right there. It was right here. We
They had a
had
hand
it
on
in
the,
our hand.
They had a hand.
We had
on
a
the
hand
title.
on the trophy, hand on the title, and you end up coming up short. And it's always gonna feel, even though, I mean, the same could be said. You know, I mentioned it before, Leicester City. I mean, if Leicester City just ended up getting edged out to second place, they're still going to be devastated, even though they're Leicester fucking City. I mean,
yeah, it wouldn't have actually been a failure.
Of course,
but
they're going to feel
like
gutted because, yeah, it was. I mean, if Leicester City finished second, I mean, that's almost historic in itself. But
yeah.
The fans would feel so gutted because they were right there. But obviously, that's the same feeling that Arsenal would have if they ended up. I mean, we're almost somewhat kind of conceding, but that's what it would feel like if they don't end up inevitably winning the title.
And they still, I mean, it's not impossible for them to win.
It's not impossible. I mean, but it's definitely like, if you didn't think it was a race before, now it's, you know, it's about as, you know, nuts to butts as it gets.
It's squeaky bum time now.